Good morning, everybody. It's 10 o'clock. We're still going to wait for some more people to pile in, but we'll get going. I know some people join us a little bit later. Some people sort of need to leave a little bit earlier. I'm really delighted that you're able to join us at a ridiculously early hour after sort of a very, very long week. I think when it was organised, I kind of made the assumption that 10 o'clock wouldn't seem too bad. And that things may be a bit more back to normal, but of course they're not, and they're getting weirder by the moment. We're really pleased that you've come to listen to our wonderful panellists this morning. If you do have any questions, I know some people have emailed them through to me. If you do have any questions, at the bottom there is a question and answer box. It could be that some of the panellists, if they're not speaking, they may be able to answer some questions as we go along. We'll do our best. We are recording this. And a copy of this will be available on the Women Ed YouTube channel later. I feel like one of those influencers. Maybe the government will pay me to go and stand in the school, maybe, you know, loads of money, not just my normal salary. Right, it is absolutely fantastic to see you. We're going to get going in just a moment. A little bit of housekeeping, just because there are possibly going to be quite a lot of people joining us this morning. Already we're up to about 90. We've muted the audience, if it is, so if you're not a panellist, you won't be able to speak, just because otherwise it's going to be bonkers. It's like going to be one of those assemblies where everybody shouts out, and as an English teacher, not a drama teacher, I like people sat down and quiet, because I'm a control freak. So if you do have anything to say, please feel free to ask those questions and answer. And obviously some of my panelists may have things they may need to pop out and do at certain times, so that's absolutely fine. So somebody may disappear at some point. Obviously Helena is here this morning with little child, so that might become a pressing need later on, so that's absolutely fine. So we're going to get cracking, and there's no rhyme nor reason to the order that I'm going to ask people to introduce themselves, apart from the order I can see them on my screen, because then it helps me keep track. After this week, I'm not entirely sure what I'm doing, so I'm going to ask Caroline Derbyshire just to start us off by introducing herself and her role and her path to headship.
Yeah. So first thing I've learned is how to unmute, and the second thing is to say that I'm Caroline. I'm the exec head at Saffron Walden County High and CEO of the Saffron Academy Trust. I was somebody who went into English teaching and sort of fell into leadership roles one way and another. Found myself being the head teacher of the village school, which kind of worked pretty well with my family, who were at primary schools at the time, and I managed to juggle headship really for the first 10 years of my career because everything was really close, and I had an amazingly supportive partner who was, you know, a proper and real partner, and we did stuff together. So that's how I managed. And for the last 5 years, I've been head of a broader and bigger organisation, and it's been really exciting. I've really enjoyed it, so I would recommend it.
I'm going to unmute myself as well now. It's going to be one of those mornings. I apologise in advance for that. I'm going to ask Claire Price for an introduction to her, please.
Good morning, everybody. I am on my second headship of a large school in the West Midlands, characterised by underperformance and children in the community characterised by poverty or vulnerability. It's very exciting but very hard work. Prior to that, I started out life as a social work trained probation officer, moved into FE lecturing, then into schools, and was single parent to 4 children and had my nephew living with me, and juggled assistant headship, deputy headship and headship in that way. So actually, although there are different challenges in the school, personally life is much more relaxed, so because they're all much older and grown up and no longer need my time. It is possible. It needs a lot of organisation. It does cause dreadful working habits, I think, that you then have to untrain yourself out of and try not to model to other people. But the job is great fun. This week's been a bit tough, but by and large it is the best job, and I think women are leading with integrity and values are always going to be absolutely fantastic at the job.
That's brilliant. Thank you, Claire. I'm now going to ask Ruth if she can introduce herself.
Hi everyone, I'm Ruth Wymark. I'm head of a large primary school in Richmond upon Thames in London. It's a very different demographic from what I've previously had headships over. This is my third headship, and I've been in headship now nearly 12 years. I was head of a large school in South London previously, primary school, and then moved international for a couple of years, and then back to London. I've got 3 children. I, like Caroline, have an amazing husband that helps and truly is co-parenting with me, and that's how I managed to juggle everything as well. And again, like Claire, some again bad working practices at times that mean that I try not to model those to other people in school. Long hours and so forth, but headship is a wonderful thing, and I enjoy it entirely, juggled with everything else in my life.
That's brilliant. Thank you ever so much. I'm going to ask Christella to introduce herself in a second. Thank you ever so much for that.
Hi, yeah, I'm Christella Jamil. I've been an executive head of 2 Church of England schools in Tottenham for a term. I've been a head previously for 7 years and an acting head before that for 18 months. Kind of went through, I think, quite a straightforward route. So became a teacher, though, late in life, became a teacher at 36. Stayed at my first school for 6 years and then started to get hungry for a bit more accountability, a little bit more of a bigger role. An assistant headship came up, so jumped. Then went into deputy headship within weeks, acting head. The rest is kind of history, but I think key to my success has been getting involved, being seen, not being afraid to be myself, and networking. Networking has been huge, and that's perhaps something we'll touch on at some point this morning, but no regrets at all. Had a few bumps along the way, but the bumps have made me stronger. So that's it from me.
Thank you ever so much, Christella. And now if I can ask Caroline Barlow just to say hello.
Hi everybody, yeah, Caroline Barlow. I'm head teacher of an 11 to 18 maintained school in East Sussex and have the privilege to currently chair the East Sussex Heads Group. So nothing as glamorous as the CEOs you've heard from already, but maybe one day. So I started teaching in 1992, which makes me feel about a gazillion years old, and my route to headship was a prolonged one, probably because I spent quite a lot of time avoiding it. I went into senior team about the turn of the millennium, and then kind of spent a lot of time doing every role within senior team apart from headship, including getting a secondment, and then eventually just got slightly bored of seeing other people of a different gender doing the job and thinking that actually it really ought to be doable. And various other life changes, and I was lucky enough to find the right school that was a really good fit for me, and I've been really happy there for the last 5 years. Who knows what the future holds, but I would agree with every comment about partners and life. But I suppose the only other thing I would say is I think there are loads of jobs out there where if you really enjoy it, it fills a section of your life. It's absolutely part and parcel of who you are. It's part of your identity, and therefore actually the doing of it, even though there's difficult bits and great bits, it is just part of who you are. And that's, if you find the right job, then that's incredibly exciting and rewarding.
Thank you ever so much, Caroline. I'm now going to ask Binks if she's able just to introduce herself.
Morning everyone. Yeah, just it's really interesting to hear other people's roots, and that's sort of prompted some memories for me as well. So I'm currently exec principal of 3 primary schools in Norwich. Prior to that I did a little stint in Saudi Arabia as a head of prep, that's another story. And then prior to that I was the head teacher of a large infant school also in Norwich, and my route into, I was just reflecting on my route into leadership, and it just reminded me of somebody said about watching Caroline, watching men succeed where obviously we couldn't. So my first sort of leadership sort of effort was I went for an assistant head role at a primary school, and my feedback from the head and the governors was that they were really, really impressed with me, but they had issues with behaviour, so a man got the job. And then 6 months later, I was invited back to say that he hadn't actually managed, spent quite a long time reading books in the corner of the classroom, and would I please take the job? Yes, I won't say anything rude because it's been recorded. And then, and the sort of juggling, I think the juggling with families, some people have families at home, our families are very different. I think it brings something to the job, and I think the experiences that you have with your children, because your children don't always do what you hope other parents' children will do, and I think that brings something to the job. I think we can understand parent perspectives and other people's circumstances in it. So it definitely is worth really cracking on with it, and you get to work with amazing people like this. So as Christella was saying, the networking is absolutely vital. Definitely worth it. It's a fantastic job.
That's brilliant. Thank you, Binks. Binks will soon be writing an 8-tome novel based on her time in Saudi Arabia that lasted a very short period of time. But yeah, there's a mini series in it. It's going to be great. I'm going to ask Nav if she can now just introduce herself and say a few words.
Thanks, Kez. Morning, everybody. It's lovely to be here with you all today. Yeah, my leadership journey, or my headship journey, began in 2012 after only 6 years in the classroom, and it was never the plan, but it was what the community needed at that time. And I kind of did it thinking, oh, I'll be an acting head and then I'll be able to go back to class again. And here we are kind of in 2020, and I never quite made it back in the same way. But a bit like what Caroline said, I kind of almost in a way just found my purpose, and I'm so grateful for that. I absolutely love it. And although I'm not a serving head anymore, the biggest joy I still get is being in schools, in the classrooms with the children. And I think, if you have that, and I see a lot of my friends outside of education who haven't quite found that purpose, so it feels like work, it kind of gets you through those tough days. I think added to my leadership journey that has really shaped where it's gone is just before I started my first substantive headship, when I got appointed, my dad suddenly passed away a week later. So I started my headship after 5 days after my dad's funeral. And I think that first year was a very unusual year for many reasons, but it was actually the community and the school that got me through. Feeling a sense of purpose and having to get up every day. And I now look back and think, actually, that kind of has made me part of the leader I am today. So yes, lovely to be here with you all, and look forward to spending time and answering some questions later.
That's fantastic. Thank you, Nav. Helena, is it a convenient time for you just to introduce yourself and everybody else that you're with?
Hi everyone, I'm Helena. Nap time isn't happening this morning, hence you have a small blonde person in this picture as well. I've been a head teacher. This is my 5th year as a head. I actually took over leading the 11 to 16 comprehensive school that Caroline Derbyshire used to be head beforehand. And when she got herself a new job, I'd been deputy for a year. So the whole, if not you, then who, if not now, then when narrative was really very pertinent to me at the same time that we were launching Women Ed. So for me, I think it's about, as someone else has said, the right fit in terms of your values, in terms of the type of school community that you find yourselves in. As you can see, I am a working mum. This is my newest addition, who's 8 months old, went back to lead in lockdown she was 3.5 months old. So juggling leadership and life has certainly been, happening a lot recently. But as other people have said, enjoying your job, having perspective, having a small child coming in with a whisk who's emptying the dishwasher at the moment. Flynn, I'll answer that question in a moment. is really central to enjoying it and finding it fulfilling. And I think certainly having pride in young people and families, you know, actually at the moment more than ever, despite the challenges, I think the privilege of leading a community is certainly the massively fulfilling part of the job.
Fantastic, thank you, Helena. Alana, are you able to just say hello and introduce yourself?
Okay, good morning everyone. I'm Alana Gay and I am the head of a small one-form independent school, prep school from 3 to 11 in North London. And I think part for me has been quite a journey. So I moved to the UK in 2001. Yeah, and then I got a job in a secondary school. So I was a secondary science teacher, was there for about 12 years. So I made that transition from learning about the UK system of education, then moving into head of department. So I was the head of science for quite a while. Then I became an associate assistant head. Then moved into another secondary school where I had a totally bad experience that made me want to leave the profession forever. But instead of doing that, I will say that I did a transition through my networks. I was able to do a transition into primary education where I was able to go in as a primary leader. And that's what saved and changed me forever. Because once you come into primary, it's very hard to go back into that secondary rat race, I have to say, even though we're not paid enough, hint, hint. But that said, spent a bit of time in primary, and then after having 3 years in primary experience, I moved in. I was given the opportunity to come in and help a school turn itself around, and that was in the independent sector. So that's where my learning is at the moment. So I'm looking forward to any questions on that transition from secondary to primary, about how to face up challenges and resilience, and even about what I'm learning about the independent sector. That said, along the way, I started off with an organization called Women Ed, and then sort of went out and set up another grassroots organization called Fame Ed, that's looking specifically at the issues of ethnic minority teachers in education. So looking forward to spending the morning with all of my colleagues here, a lot of whom I'm very familiar with. Thanks.
That's brilliant. And then if I could just ask Helen if she's able just to introduce herself.
Yeah, hi, good morning everybody. I'm a head teacher of a 11 to 16 school in the West Midlands. I think I might be a little bit unusual because this is the 15th year of my headship there. I started off in the West Midlands teaching, and then I went abroad to Japan and Berlin for 8 years in international schools. And then I was really lucky when I came back. I got a job in Spark Hill in Birmingham and had the most amazing woman head teacher. Had no plans about headship, leadership, didn't know what the national curriculum was. So yeah, I had quite an upbringing really in a really fantastic inner city comprehensive in Birmingham. Got into deputy headship there, and then when she was leaving the head, I decided to go at the same time and moved to a school in another area that was like moving back in time. So that was really good preparation for headship because I didn't realise that schools like that still existed. So I did another deputy headship there, which I know is quite unusual now. And then I got appointed in 2006 at the grand age of 43, which I hadn't intended to do. But sometimes I think, you know, somebody's already said it, you know, when it's the right fit for you. And definitely walking around my school, it just felt right, even though it was the biggest can of worms you will ever have imagined. I did a master's 3 years ago, and I wrote a dissertation about the first 3 years there, and it is fabulous reading. I don't think I'd be allowed to show it to anybody, but you forget what you've gone through, you forget what you've achieved. So it was a really good experience. Had a long distance relationship for a few years in the headship, so that was interesting. But she moved over here in 2012 and we got married in 2014. So I think that's made me a better person and a better head teacher. We don't have children, but I think I'd quite like to contribute to discussions about how to remember that partners are equally important, especially in keeping your work-life balance. I did get a job last year as Director of Education for Cornwall, but unfortunately due to family illness, I didn't end up taking up that post. But it was a really reaffirming thing that, you know, you could get a role like that at my age, and also that they could see that, you know, it was a long-term role. I've had quite a lot of bereavements in the last 7 years, so I think I'm also quite well equipped to talk about well-being and resilience. Lost my mum in April this year to COVID, and over the last few years I've lost my father and my brother and a couple of friends. So, you know, I am a big one about work-life balance, because I think that is more important than anything. And being a head teacher is the most amazing job in the world, and don't let anybody tell you any differently. I don't think you'll ever get a job that gives you so much satisfaction, so many headaches. And at the moment, I'm taking a degree in logistics, like every other head teacher in the country, because that's a whole new avenue of things to do. But it's brought our team even closer together. And most of my team have young children. So I think I'm going to try and come at it from the other perspective of how do I make sure that they have a work-life balance for their families, because I think that's really important. And thank you for the invite today. Really looking forward to it.
That's fantastic. Not least, but unfortunately, lastly, in terms of where you're positioned on my screen, we have Mereme. Absolutely delighted that you're able to join us this morning. Would you like to introduce yourself?
Yeah, good morning, everybody. My name's
Mereme, we've got a few audio
I
issues.
think I'm the baby of the group in terms of how I've been ahead.
Oh, Mereme, I think we've completely.
Oh, really?
Unfortunately.
Let me try.
Yeah, Mereme is also
Any
a tech genius, so hopefully she'll be able to sort it out. Okay. Mereme, I'm just going to let you sort yourself out, and we'll come back to you to introduce yourself in a moment. A lot of the questions that have been coming in is around preparation for headship, and some people have asked about. Sorry, Mereme. No, I haven't got you at the moment, I'm afraid. A lot of the questions coming in have been about preparation for headship, about whether masters are necessary or requirements, whether the MPQH is worth doing it, whether, you know, what you need to do in order to get ready for headship in real practical terms. I'm going to ask people to volunteer to answer on that in a minute. I'm hoping Mereme will be able to sort out her audio, and then we'll introduce a kind of out of sync, if that makes sense. That's because I don't want to lose her. So is there anyone that would like to kick us off in terms of the best preparation for headship before I pick on someone? Caroline Barlow.
Hiya. I suppose it'll be interesting to juxtaposition potentially what I might say with people who got there quicker, and see what their take on it is, because I think there's validity in both. But certainly for me, I must have done almost every single job on senior team in my efforts to avoid headship, which meant that I'd spent probably about 15 years doing each of the different roles within senior team, as well as some outside of a school. And I think for me, then when I started, it meant that I had at least some experiential confidence and some decision-making capital that I'd established over time. I think the MPQH is probably worth doing, not necessarily for the reasons why it'll tell you that it's worth doing, but certainly for the networks that you build up, the thinking time that it gives you, the reading material that then gives you more to think about. I certainly didn't have a master's at any point. It was something that I'd always fancied doing, and literally have only just started doing one about 2 weeks ago. So certainly not essential for headship. But if you're a person who likes learning and continuing to think, then you'll find any route through to doing that. But certainly for me, it was about feeling confident in myself, and probably aside from any content knowledge, that would be the only thing that I would say is make sure that you know who you are and that you're confident in who you know yourself to be, because one of the critical things about headship for me, from my perspective, is about being authentic and genuine. And then if you know then that that's where your decision making is coming from, actually you're probably not going to go too far wrong.
That's lovely. Has anybody else got anything? Ruth?
I'm going to juxtaposition with Caroline, and it will be helpful, I think, for some people to hear my journey. I qualified and then became primary teacher, lots of different roles, but actually in my NQT year applied and was accepted for the old fast track scheme. So back in then, we got a lot of CPD, professional development on leadership at the National College for School Leadership, as it was then. And within 5 years, I was co-head. And I think for me, as someone who came through an assistant head route, so I became assistant head after 3 years of a large 2-form entry primary school. I then became co-headship, working alongside an experienced head who was there part-time. I was there full-time in the 2 different roles, was an incredible route in. And as Caroline has said, you know, you get a lot of confidence actually from 2 heads. Sometimes are indeed better than one. You have to be, though, united and completely the same ethos in terms of your vision and expectations and how you work together as a team. And I've got immense privilege of working alongside someone called Irene Leaves, and she was incredible as a person, a colleague to work alongside. There was never a sense of one being above the other. We were the same. We made the same united decisions, but that experience of saying to someone, has this ever happened to you before? And Irene saying, no, this has never happened to me before, is a really helpful one.
That's brilliant. I think Caroline Derbyshire wanted, am I right in thinking you put your hand up?
Yeah. So, I mean, you know, similar sort of themes, but I think the thing that I often hear from female colleagues, middle leaders, you know, and senior leaders is that they are really conscious that they have gaps in their own leadership experience or in their interest, actually. Sometimes just people don't want to do certain jobs. And I think that the thing is about being a head is you kind of go from being quite a specialist person who's perhaps, you know, focusing on teaching and learning or, you know, in their own curriculum, to being a bit of a generalist who's got to know about IT systems to some degree and what the site team are doing and who knows, you know, online learning and all sorts of malarkey which you never expect to know about. And I think actually the most helpful thing that I found from doing MPQH was realising I actually didn't need to be all those things. I just needed to be myself, and I needed to surround myself with people who would fill the gaps for me. And as long as I asked good questions and I took an interest in what they were doing and I became more informed in time, actually that was okay. I didn't have to be all things. If I could play to my strengths, then you know, I could do the job. And that was something I sort of learned theoretically in MPQH. When I started work as a head, it absolutely was true. And it was probably my biggest take home from MPQH was that thing about not having to be able to be good at everything, but being able to build a complementary team. And I do think that, you know, women are prone to not having that confidence because they think, I can't do this or I can't do that. It doesn't matter.
That's brilliant. I'm just mindful that we've just need to consider things. If I'm going to ask a few more people to ask some questions, answer some questions, and then we think we've got Mareme back. In terms of that preparation for headship, someone has asked about you know, getting ready to manage finances. I mean, every school's got a fairly big budget, although it doesn't feel that big when you're actually trying to spend it. We've had a couple of things about changing from primary to secondary, and whether there's any other preparation apart from qualifications. So I'll just take another few answers on that. And I'm going to, Alana, is there anything that you want to share before we sort of ask other people as well?
I think going back onto that first question of coming into headship, I think that my journey's been a little bit different in that I didn't have an environment that supported me into headship, so therefore I had to go and find the information myself. So within my school, I didn't have someone who would support me into leadership or everything else. As a matter of fact, in the 2 experiences I've had, I think I was supported into middle leadership and then told that's as far as we want you to go, or that's as far as you're going. So I then went out and applied externally, did a little rebellion, and went and applied for Future Leaders at that time, because it was just run as a Future Leaders program. And it is by getting onto that program that I started learning about leadership within itself, because that wasn't something that the administration I was with was going to support me in doing. And that's where I learned about senior leadership. And that meant I started doing a lot of reading around leadership, and I started doing a lot of work and thinking around leadership. So by the time I got to being a deputy head, I had had so many thoughts about leadership, and having been a part of that Future Leaders network, having viewed what my colleagues were doing and sort of them being open and having conversation with me about leadership, I felt confident in putting myself forward. Now, that said, by the time I got around to doing my NPQH, I really had no interest in the NPQH, so I did not find it supportive or helpful. I found it a tick box activity where I'm ashamed to admit I didn't even tick the box the first time. So I had to do a resubmission, because what they asked me to submit, I was like, what is this criteria? What does this have to do with leadership? You're not even teaching me much about finance. Bob, what is the point of this? So I just wanted to put that point forward, that it's not always that you're going to have that environment where someone is supporting you. But if you be a part of the right networks, you will have the people around you who will teach you a lot about leadership. It doesn't just have to be within your school environment.
That's brilliant. Helena, was there anything that you'd like to add to that?
I just think this notion of being ready is really interesting. We've got a divide in the questions, with some people saying, how can I make sure that I'm ready? Have I got enough experience? And then some people saying, have I missed the boat? Am I too old? Is it too late? And I think maybe that's something about women, that we think there's this right time, there's this perfect formula about when we are ready for headship. And I think there are lots of journeys. It's like the jungle gym Sheryl Sandberg analogy. There are lots of routes to headship, as you've already heard this morning, in terms of, you know, for me, I sat on 3 different SLTs in 3 different schools, and I learnt loads about different leadership styles and different ways of doing things. But some people will become a leader in their own school. So I think there isn't one right way, but maybe we just are a bit too critical of ourselves and our gaps, as the research tends to point to worry that we haven't quite got the right recipe. I know Jill Berry's on the line. I'm not getting any sort of commission, but I would say her book, Making the Leap, is an absolute definite read of all of the books about leadership in terms of making that transition to headship. And having Jill as a leadership coach on the journey made a huge difference to me. And I think leadership coaching, you know, some people have said that happens within your own school, not always. Finding someone perhaps externally that can be your sounding board, that you can really be honest and talk things through, I think is a massive part of that. For me, NPQH I did when I was actually a head, and it was really tempting to drop out because of all the operational demands and feeling like it wasn't worth doing. But actually, I think, like lots of people have said, stepping away from the day job and finding that time to think about leadership is really key. So I would encourage people to find the right NPQH. Every single facilitated version of it is very different in terms of who's leading it, and what the feel of it is and what the type of people that are on it. So I think I'd be picky in terms of who your provider is if you are going to do it.
Absolutely. Is there anything lastly on that one before we just hopefully we turn back to Mareme and that? Okay, that's brilliant. Mareme, do we have you?
Good morning. Can you hear me?
It's still a little bit.
Can you hear me?
We will persevere and hopefully it will clear up a bit.
Goodness.
Oh no, it's still a bit bad. I can tell you've gone away and tried to get yourself sorted.
Yeah, it's just a bit laggy.
Oh.
No, I'm here.
No, that's.
Why can't you hear me?
No, I think you're right.
I have a plan.
I'm really sorry.
I have a plan.
No, unfortunately, Mareme, I think something, right, she's got a plan. She's going to hopefully come back. There's been lots of questions this morning around about why women are underrepresented in senior leadership and headship. We've got a number about the further difficulties of intersectionality for Black women, for gay women, for women of different faiths. why that is and what we can do to overcome that. So obviously Women Ed is firstly about women, but intersectionality is something that we know impacts massively on all women and all people in society. So we're just going to see if anybody is able to or willing to suggest some reasons for that and what we're going to do to improve that. Is there anyone that would, Mareme, do we think you've got your back?
Hello.
Oh, look at that. We've got it. Yay. Right. Mareme, right, before we go into that, and I will ask you the question that I've just asked everybody first, but I'm going to let you introduce yourself and then we're going to go into, you know, overcoming some obstacles to headship for women.
Yeah. So good morning, everybody. My name is Marame Mafwoko. I'm sorry about the tech issues. I've ended up just using my mobile data because it's much more reliable. So I think I'm the newest headship out of the panel here. I got my headship in June, actually, of this year, whilst off sick at home with coronavirus, which was very interesting. I faced a lot of barriers into headship, and I think I've seen a lot of people in the comments kind of talking about imposter syndrome and how do you know when you're ready. And for me, I realized that it wasn't that I wasn't ready, it's that I was believing everybody else who told me that I wasn't. And I think that can be a major barrier for women. And I feel, especially as a Black woman, especially as a Muslim woman, you're always kind of told that's not the role for you. And sometimes you do have to sit back and say, no, you're wrong. It is the role for me, just not at this school. So I'm going to go and find somewhere else that sees my value and sees my potential.
That's brilliant. I think that's really important. I think a lot of people get caught up in the, my school doesn't want me to do the leadership journey that I want to participate in. I end up getting stuck. And actually, sometimes you've got to go somewhere else. And it's that kind of that strength to be able to do that and the willingness to do that, particularly if you've been listening to some of those opinions from people that are telling you you're not ready. Is there anything, I mean, Mareme, did you just always know that this was your, you know, your destiny, your right to be a head teacher, or is there something that you've come to get there?
No, I never wanted to be a head. Never. I would walk down the street with a sign saying, I will never be a head teacher. I never wanted to do it. I never thought it was for me. I thought that it meant a job where you were just sat behind a desk filling out Microsoft spreadsheets. But I think, and I had this very idealistic idea of what life was going to be like after I did my PGCE. So I'd worked in schools for many years and then thought, right, I need to get a proper qualification now. So I did my PGCE like 2016. And I was like, I'm going to work in a Black school, you know, with a Black head teacher and Black SLT members and Black teachers and Black students. And it's going to be great and life is going to be great. And I'm not going to face any barriers because everybody above me knows what it was like to get to that stage and they're going to be supportive. And it just wasn't that. It really, without going into too much detail, it just really wasn't that. And I think it was at that point that I said, I want to be in a position where I can give chances to people in the way that chances weren't given to me. And that was kind of when I started thinking about, okay, maybe I do want a role as a leader. And to be honest, I kind of fell into my headship in a way. The school where I'm a head, I started off as a supply teacher 1 day a week. And over the 2.5 years, I just worked my way up. But I think one thing that's really important is realizing not all headships are the same. So if you still do want to have teaching in your timetable, there are schools out there where you can do that. If you don't want to do any teaching as part of your timetable, there are schools out there that will do that. And I think it's just going out there, seeing what's there. You know, I really advocate for doing supply work because it allows you to go and see lots and lots of schools in a short space of time. and it allows you to kind of get an idea of what the options are out there, and it can open your eyes sometimes to what you really want.
That's fantastic, thank you. I've had a number of people sort of waving, and actually Bix looks like she's going to explode. So Bix, I'm going to come to you next, and I'd imagine probably everybody has something they want to say on this. So Bix, if you speak, and then I'll go to Helen. If there's anybody else, wave at me.
Yeah, I think one of the things that we have to remember when we're doing this, you know, and I say it doesn't matter what level you're working at. If you're working in education, you've probably got a long day on your hands. You've probably got a long year ahead of you. So do your homework, and make you know, just try and find somewhere, you know, really look at things as a two-way process rather than just thinking, I want a headship, I want a leadership position. You know, try and find some sort of first followers, people that you feel like, yeah, actually, if I was here, I think I could make this difference. There's some opportunity, and about connecting to what your values are, and finding a place where you think, actually, I can really bring something to this. It might be a journey. I mean, certainly my last the one before last, it took me 2 years, and it nearly broke me, but I really thought I had something to bring to the community, and I could, you know, I believed in, you know, that you can have different values, but we all have equal worth. And, you know, seeking help and finding, and I've noticed there's been a few questions about how do you do it, and you have to create a network, because otherwise it becomes very, very solitary. But also going along to, I've been for interviews, and after day one I've gone, not a chance, because this, you know, the way people are speaking, the way people are behaving, particularly around governance, but particularly around trustees, if it really doesn't resonate with your values, walk away, because you're a long time there, and try and find somewhere where you feel you fit. People are talking about recommended reads as well. We've spoken about Jill, but I think the Brené Brown Dare to Lead is superb, absolutely superb. And just getting yourself in the ring, and being able to expose your vulnerabilities, but doing it sensibly without making yourself look like you're not coping. So I suppose it's about judicious choice, and being able to say no if you get a bad sense. And I think sometimes we don't trust our intuitions enough, and sometimes trust your intuition and go, nah, not for me, or actually, yes, I'm going to really go for this. And as Mireme says, sometimes it just doesn't suit, and then get your coat. It's my favourite saying, just get your coat and go somewhere else, because life's too short.
Absolutely.
Finish.
Absolutely. Helen, and then we'll ask, Caroline Barlow asked, and then Nav, and then Christella, I think, if there's anybody else.
Yeah, it was the question to do with, you know, BAME and gay head teachers, etc. And you know, I think the really difficult part is first of all that the profession is dominated by probably white male head teachers, and that's not a criticism of them, because I know some absolutely amazing ones. But it's that representation thing of when you're looking around, perhaps as a deputy or assistant head, or, you know, head of department or whatever. And, you know, I think the BAME network now is fantastic that it's growing. And, you know, without being too obvious, you can see role models in that group, and, you know, you can approach role models in that group, and that's great. I think it's much different if you are gay, because I think I knew one gay male head teacher that was out, and I didn't know any female head teachers that were gay that were out. And I think that's probably because a lot of governing bodies are white males who sometimes older, who don't necessarily, you know, have a wider view of life. You know, we get lots of comments like, well, you must be really busy anyway with your children, you know, that type of comment that you get. And you get exactly the same if you're single, oh, you've never married, you know, and that type of thing. So I think we've got a long way to go in terms of more representation being obvious. ASCL this year had as one of their themes diversity. Personally, I don't think it was a real genuine theme. I think they're paying lip service to it. But it's just really difficult to be, in lots of ways, an out gay head teacher. And you know, I follow quite a lot of teachers on Twitter, generally younger ones, who are out, and I just admire them immensely. And I hope that that's because things have changed immensely over the last few years. But a lot does depend on your governing body, your school, your community. I'm in a school where the community was very misogynistic, let alone homophobic. So, you know, it's been a mountain to climb in terms of, you know, if you were ethnic minority there, you know, they've got everything, racist, homophobic. And I think I've seen the change in 15 years there, not because I've been out, because I'm ashamed to say in lots of ways I haven't been. I suppose I've tried to do it in the way that the school is run and the openness to students to be able to come out. And what I always say is no students ever ask me. And I don't know whether that's because kind of they know and I have that attitude, or whether they're terrified. I don't know which. I hope not the latter. But I just think we need more representation, and we need more of the Chartered College and ASCL and other organisations like that to make it a really big deal, so that when people are you know, authentic and brave enough to be out, that it's really celebrated and promoted. And I think we're a long way from that at the moment in terms of national organisations.
Absolutely, Helen. I'm going to go to Caroline Barlow, and then we've got Nav and Christella. And then if there's anybody else that wants to wave at me, feel free to do so. Caroline?
Yeah, I'll be really quick. Massive respect to Mareme and to Helen for, if you like, their testimony, I suppose, for want of a better word. I think probably there was just two things that I would want to pick up on. One is that going back to what Mareme was saying about seeing lots of different schools, and in a sense I'd just flag up another way of doing that was I managed that through my secondment, which I did with the SSAT, and I have to give a massive shout to Sue Williamson, who was probably the biggest rocket up my backside that I had in terms of stopping me just going round in circles and just sitting me down and telling me that it was inevitable that I was going to be ahead and I should actually just stop avoiding that. And I have huge respect for her in her role, and also in the influence that she very quietly has over a huge number of people. And there's lots of women out there doing that, and not necessarily doing it in a very loud way, that I think are really positive. And that would be the only second thing that I would just very quickly put on the table, is actually, regardless of what section of society you come from, where you feel that you either do or don't fit in, I think for too many of us, there's just a deficit model about how either we are viewed or how we view society. So as much as, you know, others have spoken about their challenges, you could look and say, actually, there's a straight white female who has a straightforward perspective on life, but I spend a lot of my time being viewed in that particular way, which brings its own challenges as well, and have some fairly choice descriptions of me that I've heard from various parents, which aren't particularly flattering or remarking on my intelligence, but other areas of myself instead. So there's a little bit where I would just say, women to women, if we can be as positive as possible and really recognise each other's strengths, because that's where we start to build each other's confidence up and stop each other looking at the deficit model, but actually instead try and fill the glass up.
Absolutely, thank you for that. Nav?
Thank you for all of the comments previously, and yeah, totally with you with all of that. I think there was a question about BAME panelists sharing how they deal with parents who treat them differently because they're female and BAME. Yeah, I remember early on in my headship, I suppose for me, there's never been kind of things that have been kind of key moments, but it's just been nuanced things throughout my journey. So one of them being, I think, when I was a leader and the local authority had a director of education come in, and I dared to ask a question, and then he went back and told the exec head that there's a very fiery deputy head at the school, which I just could not believe. What, by asking a question I'm fiery, or is that because I'm Asian you expect certain things of me? And that was the first time I started realizing, because before that I was probably quite naive and ignorant to the different groups that I was representing. I was just working really hard and trying to serve communities. In my first year as head teacher, previously they used to have lots of different kind of community and charity events, and parents had said that there was a lot of money being asked for dressing up for this, that and the other. And we had a lot of autistic children in our school. And so we decided that that year we needed to kind of, you know, celebrate and highlight that so that the community understood a bit more about the children and the families that we had within our school. So I made the decision that year, instead of asking for a Red Nose Day and the autism, just to do the autism, which I explained, and ended up with this screenshots that were sent to me via Facebook from parents just going into these long threads about how, you know, these people come to our countries with their turbans and saris and take away our Red Nose Day. Now, for me, I suppose my chimp side and the emotional trigger that initially when I saw that, and that was from another parent who'd screenshot it and sent it, obviously I just wanted to become my South East London self and tell them about themselves. Then when I stopped and reflected on it, I had to take the learning from that actually I hadn't realised how much some of the community attributed to Red Nose Day, whether I agree solely with some the comments that they said or not. Secondly, that actually it's my responsibility as a leader of that community to model to them, irrespective of if they want to talk about saris and turbans and all of the connotations. If I don't engage in a positive way, how are we ever going to move on? So I rang them and asked them to come in for a cup of coffee, one-to-one. Some of them did and some chose not to, but actually that was hard for me. But you know, what would have been the alternative to kind of back or so yeah, there have been things along the way, but I do think that if we've come in it to serve and lead communities, then we have to model that ethical and relational way and educate communities sometimes. I also think the comments earlier about women supporting women, like I'm totally there for it. And I think a lot of my early journey was probably a bit lonelier. And as I've gone on, having these networks, I just feel so much more held. I'd also massively recommend, there's somebody called Viv Groskrop, and she's got a podcast and a book called How to Own the Room. And that has been, I've only discovered that in the last 2 years, and it's really been instrumental. It's about women finding themselves in spaces which are sometimes they're not expecting or that are dominated by men. And she's also got another book that's just come out. I'm not getting any kind of royalties for this, but it's called Lift As You Climb, and it's women and the art of ambition. And it's about how as women leaders, we're then holding that space and lifting and bringing others with us. So I would really recommend those 2 books. Thank you.
Fantastic. No, thank you for sharing that. Christella.
What I was going to say, I think has been said anyway, so I'm just going to say something completely different. Where Maremme was alluding to the point that, you know, through supply, she'd had experiences of a variety of schools. I remember about 4 years ago, Hannah Wilson introduced me to Women Ed. And through that, I got a place on a course called Leading Beyond One School. So I was a head at the time. And it was with the Southwark Teaching Alliance. It was Kate Chattel who was the director at the time. I think she's now the CEO of Challenge Partners. But by doing that course with, I think there were 8, I think there was funding for 8 women to do the Leading Beyond One School course, I had a chance to go and visit a variety. They were predominantly South London schools, which was great because at the time I was in Enfield, so it was a completely different network of leaders. And it's about exactly doing what you're all saying, you know, by putting yourself on a pedestal, by finding what you're comfortable with, by being proud to follow your values, by looking for ethics, but also about doing what's right for you. And it's not bad if you're working in a setting that doesn't align to your values. You use that as a stepping stone to, did someone say get your coat, or I can't remember the phrase, you know, you jump ship, you find the community that deserves you. So I just wanted to echo, there are other routes, even if you are ahead and you think this is the end of the line, it's not if that's what you're looking for. And you can find that diversity throughout our community. The other thing, if I may very quickly just say, I remember when I took on my first headship after being an acting head for about 18 months, and then went to a school that within 3 weeks got an Ofsted grading that wasn't the one they were waiting for. So everything was my fault. And I thought I had to be in every class, model every lesson, take lessons. I think I did it for 2 years, not every class, but predominantly the upper classes. And I think it almost destroyed me to the point where I couldn't be ahead. and be in class, and it bothers me when people judge people. So I actually think every opportunity I'd like to get in class, yes, but my staff are much more equipped and better trained, and their CPD, so their lessons are much better than mine at the moment. So it's not something I think I'm failing. I love it and I miss it. I don't feel it's actually a part of my current role at the moment. That's all I wanted to say.
Fantastic. I think we've covered all sorts of, blockages, whether it's misogyny, racism, sort of discrimination towards you for your sexuality or your religion. Is there anyone else that would like to add anything on that? Caroline?
Yeah, I just wanted to say, I think misogyny, like all kinds of hideous prejudice, has to be called out when it's seen, and I think that's much easier to do in these days than it was when I first started my career, when it was, that misogyny was the dominant philosophy in education. I think what's more difficult is dealing with male privilege, which, quite often quite pleasant men who don't even know they have those attitudes kind of slip into things. And I think that, I certainly feel there's a role for me working with some of these lovely men to wake them up to that privilege and wake them up to some of the assumptions that they're making. So I very often will be quite explicit about things, happy to make men feel uncomfortable, happy to be explicit about what I'm doing, why I'm doing it, because I think, there's a role to play in that. And I know there are, I think women are split in their view, is it better just to ignore men and get on and do what we do? Or is it important to take men with us? And my own view has always been that it's much more helpful to take men with us.
Absolutely. Thank you for that, Caroline. We're going to just move on to some sort of, I don't know whether we call it work-life balance or home-life balance, or whether there's any balance at all at the moment, because it is a little bit bonkers. So some of us may be tainted by the last 6 months, but obviously people are asking around, ways of sort of managing different kind of home and family lives with the demands of headship, whether you're in a relationship or whether you're not in a relationship and you're single, whether you've got children or whether you've not got children, whether you're a carer for other relatives or whatever it is. Is it possible to do the job regardless? Is there anyone? Mareme, would you like to come in on that first, and then Claire, and then we'll see where we go. Mareme.
So this is something that I've struggled with for a very long time, not just as a head, just generally in my life, having that balance. And for me, it's put on your own mask before you put on somebody else's, in the sense that if you don't look after yourself, you are going to burn out. And one thing I think I've realized, especially over the last 6 to 12 months, is there is always somebody who can come and do the job that you're doing, in the sense of if you burn out and you're gone, they will still find somebody to replace you. Ultimately, it's your life, it's not your school's life. You don't belong to them. So have boundaries, and it's up to you to decide what your boundaries are, but once you've made them, stick to them. So for me, one of my boundaries is I don't take work home. So for example, if I have a work call at 5 o'clock, I will make sure that I stay and I finish that call at work, so that once I get home, I am at home. I have at least one day a week where I will not have any meetings after school, so that I can go home, do what I want to do, go and do some shopping, obviously not at the moment, but go and do some shopping back in the day. And also, whoever your team is around you, whether that's your partner, whether that's your children, your grandmother, I don't know, a friend, a fellow teacher, have somebody who can hold you to account. Have somebody who knows that on Tuesdays you're supposed to leave early and is going to say, babe, it's 4 o'clock on Tuesday, why are you still at work? It's time to go home. I think that's so, so important. I think as educators, we're so used to being the one that everybody comes to. We're so used to being the ones that have to kind of hold out until everybody else is done piling on top of us. But I think recognize that it's okay to say to people, I need you to stop piling. I had to do that this week. I had to sit my staff down and say, you cannot pile anything else on my shoulders because I am going to break. And if I break, if you think it's hard now when I'm here, how is it going to be if I break and I'm not here? So just really recognizing and just being honest and saying to people, you know, I literally just saw somebody tweet about, they were quite upset because they said, I try really hard not to email my staff over the weekends to give them a break. And somebody has just emailed me and it was something that could have waited till next week. And now I'm going to have to spend the whole weekend thinking about it and dealing with it. Having those kinds of boundaries with your staff. Yes, you might think, I'm not going to email people, but let people know that. Let them know the same way that I'm going to give you the respect of not emailing you after 6 o'clock, for example, I need you to do the same for me. The support I'm giving to you, I need some reciprocation. That would be top tip from me.
That's fantastic. Thank you, Mirame. Claire. And then,
yeah, I think the issue of work-life balance is sort of quite thorny, isn't it? Because we all do the job because we love it. We're all here on a Saturday morning, whether as panelists or people are part of the event, because we actually love what we do and we want to think about it more. And so therefore, often work takes over because it doesn't feel like work. And I think we need to own that. I think we need to own our personal values. I think we need to know what we're modeling to staff. I don't always get that right. And I often say to staff, you know, I sometimes work till silly hours because I'm really interested in what I'm doing, but I don't expect them to do the same. So it's about expectation. It's about values, about family life. I had at times 5 young children. I was a head teacher of these 5 young children, none of them at secondary school. As a single parent, so I had to boundary my life. Did I have a better work-life balance? I doubt it. I probably got out more. I've got 2 dogs to try and do that, but it's about how you live at particular times. The other thing I'd sort of throw back, and I'm seeing a lot of questions here about, we sort of default to seeing ourselves in relation to the leadership stereotype. I've never seen a man being asked, well, how do you manage having children and the job? It's just accepted that that's possible. How are you managing when your mum's ill and having the job? How are you managing this relationship breakup and the job? That isn't asked, and we've got to stop asking it of ourselves. Sometimes things are tough, but to be fair, sometimes life is tough, whether I were working in headship or in a completely different job. That is life, and it's about living your values, leading with your values, knowing that you sometimes get it wrong, and helping other people to live by their values, and knowing for some people sometimes we reach the hand out, sometimes they reach the hand out to us, and it's about that. And if we're going to be true leaders with integrity, we have to have humility and we have to have values, and work-life balance sorts itself out somewhere along the way in that.
thank you, Claire. Ruth wanted to say something, Helena does, and then Caroline and Alana. Oh, it's fantastic, everyone's all excited. Right, but we're going to go to Ruth first, if that's okay.
So a bit like Claire, I think about work-life balance in a different way. I think about it being a fulcrum, and actually when you can move that fulcrum when life needs a bit more or when work needs a bit more, it's actually about having control. And as a head, you actually do have quite a lot of privilege in being able to move that fulcrum for yourself. And I think that's the key thing. I love this job. I get energized by being in education, and I get excited, and therefore what you like doing, you put your energies into. Sometimes my children need me, to be there for parent-teacher consultation. So I have to, at that point, be able to move my fulcrum, be able to give that aspect to life and whatever. But also I think it's a privilege because my children see the amount of joy that I get out of my job. They see the amount of joy that I get out of being with them as well. And it's about them understanding that actually mummy is busy sometimes. And that's okay. It's a, they understand that. But it is about being able to move that fulcrum. And as part of being a head, actually, you get a lot of privilege that way, a lot of responsibility to use that correctly, and also to enable others to have that work-life balance.
Absolutely. Thank you for that. Helena, and then Alana, and then Caroline B, if that's okay. And then again, I'll come back to hands up. So,
Modern at the moment, but I think I completely agree with what Ruth was saying. I think we need to get to the root cause of what causes the burnout sometimes and not managing the work-life balance effectively. And I would say for a lot of women, myself included and others I've worked with, it's two things. It's guilt and it's perfectionism. And we have to kind of dig deep and think, right, why are we feeling guilty about not working or not being a good enough mum? What's the root of that and how do we tackle it? And we need to banish perfectionism. And Ray Snape, I don't know if she's listening in, but, you know, guilt is a wasted emotion. It is. It's natural. It shows that we care about our different roles that we have in our life, but it's not healthy. And perfectionism isn't manageable. So how do we try and tackle that? Some people have said about having really clear boundaries, you know, no text, no work emails on your phone, or not working on a certain day of the week. I think you just have to figure out what works for you, and what works for you at one stage in your life won't necessarily work all the time. And I know lots of people that have certain boundaries and rules, and then they become a parent, for instance, and they don't work anymore. And that's when they need to kind of readjust, as Ruth was saying, the fulcrum. For me at the moment with a baby, I'm actually working really long days at work, but coming home ready for bath time at maybe 7:30, and then trying not to do much else. Whereas normally I'd get home a bit earlier and try and spend time with my kids, and it's not ideal. But at this moment in time, it's just what's working, and it might not work in 2 weeks' time. So I think, you know, knowing yourself and knowing your situation and tweaking accordingly, being flexible, being kind to yourself is really important.
that's fantastic. Thank you. Alana.
I think I'm going to echo everything Helena says. Work-life balance is something that's personal to you. I think imposing it onto others doesn't necessarily make for the best environment. So I find it best, my staff always know, I find it best I send emails at 1 a.m, because that's the time when I've already had a nap, woken up, my brain is fresh, I'm going to get everything done, and I'm just blazing through the emails at that point in time because I'm undisturbed. I have a 17-year-old, he's doing studies, so when he's studying, I can get some work done, or I'm cooking, or I'm doing house life and all the rest, and all those other things are happening. Then it comes to that sort of imposition of, I'm not going to put, no one can send emails after 6 p.m. As much as that helps your work-life balance, what you've just done is impose something that really affects someone else. So to my staff, I tell them your work-life balance needs to go with where you are in life and what's happening in your life. If you have to care for a parent, do that. It's not so much about work-life balance as it is about us being really clear on where our priorities lie and who our priorities lie, and what time we have to allocate to every single other person as well as allocate to ourselves. And if we can get that right, then you'll find that your work-life balance automatically falls into place because you've worked on what are the priorities for your life. So focus more on that, and the work-life balance sorts itself out.
That's brilliant. Thank you. Caroline?
Yeah, I think there's lots of common threads there, isn't there? I was going to talk about going back to what I was saying about knowing yourself and being really authentic with yourself, because then you're making decisions about your prioritization, which means that the guilt that Helena was talking about is easier to manage because you're authentic about why you're making the choice that you're making, whether it's to care for your mum or to be there for a child. I think there's probably two things, and I don't really want to be too controversial, but I kind of feel they have to come out. One is that the people who have made the greatest number of comments to me about work-life balance have been other women. They are the people who have said to me, oh, your poor children, how are they managing? They're the ones who say to me, I don't know how you manage it all. They're the ones who say to me, oh, your husband's a head teacher as well. I don't know how you manage that. Nobody asks him. And there's an element whereby I suppose I was going back to, we have to avoid the deficit model of how we talk to each other, because all we're doing is reinforcing the prejudices that society has put on us in the first place. So there's a little bit about being really careful about how we talk to each other and how we bolster and reinforce each other. And I'll park that one there, and then I'll just land the second one, which is, Caroline mentioned it earlier, and so did Ruth, about having a partner who is genuinely your partner. And Carolyn mentioned the misogyny word, and somebody else mentioned privilege. And again, I'm not trying to be controversial, but having had a partner who was not a genuine partner, who made my life 10 times more difficult, and I felt like I had 3 children at the time instead of just the 2 I'd given birth to. That made life incredibly more difficult. I now have a partner who is much more my partner. I actually have 4 children as a result, and life is much more straightforward. But that was about me being honest with myself about what the root of the problem was, because never at any point through that was the job the real problem. The real problem was the things I wasn't facing up to in my own life.
That's brilliant. Is there anybody else with anything else on that, Binks? And then we'll go on to what may be the last question, but I'll talk to everybody about what we'll do afterwards. Thank you.
Absolutely everything that everybody said, I think I wholeheartedly agree with. I think the one thing, and it's not very, you know, when you look at sort of team dynamics and the effective, what makes an effective team dynamic, and something that people don't talk about very often because it's not fantastically interesting, but being organised actually really helps your work-life balance, and what we're not, I think sometimes what we're not very good at is allocating fixed amounts of time for jobs. I really recommend a book called The Organised Mind. And I think something as women, we tend to celebrate multitasking. Multitasking is a myth. You don't multitask, you attention switch. And that means you're doing 2 things quite badly. So I think if we can just think, I don't think we invest enough in looking at time management, because it's not very sexy, it's a bit boring, but actually it really helps you get some jobs done. That frees up your old, you know, this sort of frontal bit of your brain that's going, shit, I haven't done this, I haven't done that, oh my goodness. Actually, if you box yourself some time and feel like you're achieving some things, it just lowers your whole sort of cortisol levels. So I think having a look at time management and organisation would be something that I think I've worked with a lot of the leaders in my schools, and they're starting to use sort of 2 weekly time plans where they box it and they communicate it to other people, and they say, sorry, I can't come and do that at the moment because I'm working on this, as opposed to just having that open door all the time where we facilitate people. You know, it's not a fantastically exciting point, but I do think looking at a bit of time management does really help people, and just that kind of whole, how am I organising my time to enable me to free myself up so that when I'm with my family, whoever my family are, I'm not sort of thinking, oh God, I haven't done that. And just my other tip at the end of the day, if you want to feel decent about yourself, write down what you've done, not what you've still got to do.
I like that. Caroline D, you put your hand up.
Yeah, I just wanted to also say that we just also need to be sort of mindful that quite a lot of working cultures amongst senior leaders in schools work around, you know, male traditional roles. And if you're the first member of the senior team with small children, and you end up having to go home earlier, pick them up from nursery, creche, whatever, you have to break the mould for other women who follow. And I think that's kind of, you know, sometimes women themselves are not great at recognising that the models of leadership behaviour that they are following are the ones established by men who went before. And then they start bringing that judgment to bear upon people who want to work in different, more flexible ways. And I think that, you know, again, we just need to kind of ask ourselves, does it need to be that way? You know, and judge people by their outcomes, not by the patterns by which they work, you know, because I think people can achieve wonderful things by working in quite different ways.
Absolutely. I think that's really important. You know, especially at the moment, I suspect most schools are sort of, you've got different starts and end times depending on bubbles. And, you know, I'm still hearing comments from people about, well, they left early. It's like, well, no, they didn't. They left on time, and bloody well so should you. So it's about us managing that and making sure that happens for everybody. I'm going to ask the last question now, but before I do, I just want to remind everybody that obviously this is a Women Ed event, and we do have a book out soon, but I'm not going to plug that one. Obviously the other one is up there. Feel free to buy it. Lots of you will have questions and you won't be able to maybe have them answered today. So what we're going to do is obviously try and use a hashtag on Twitter. That if you use the hashtag AskAhead, and also maybe if it's nice, the hashtag Women Ed, and sort of either ourselves or anybody else may wish to get involved in that. And obviously a number of us have our DMs open as well. So I've gone really high. Oh my God, it's back to front. Okay, keep going up with that. Right, I am.
It was the right way.
No, it's fine.
The right way.
Right, okay. Anyway, ask ahead. If you put on Twitter, ask ahead, and you've got a question, then everyone will try and pile in at some point over the weekend. And because obviously quite a lot of us now are probably going to go either back to bed or go out and have lives and things like that. The last question, and I'm going to ask everybody this, and I'll probably go in reverse order. Apologies, Caroline. Though some people have moved their positions on my screen, so I don't know how that works. It's magic. It's witchcraft probably with all of us women here today. It's basically, is it worth it? Is it worth being a head teacher? And why is that? So, Mareme, I'm going to ask you first, as you went last time. Mareme, is it?
Yes, yes. But I'm going to caveat that by saying that if something else in your life comes up that you feel is more worth it, don't feel like you can't give it up. You know, there's no shame in becoming a head and then something else coming up in your life that you feel is more important and saying, I'm going to give that up and I'm going to go back and be a teacher or be a TA or be a lunchtime supervisor because I want to dedicate more of my life to doing this other thing.
I think that's brilliant. Thank you for that, Mareme. Helena, is it worth it and why?
Yes, I think the two key words that a lot of people have said today is fulfilling and energizing, and the sphere of influence that you have as a head teacher is phenomenal and it's incredibly rewarding. But like other people said, it depends how you do it and it depends what's going on in your life. That's not to say that, you know, clearly I'm modelling the fact that life can continue whilst doing it. But I don't, you know, martyrdom can hit headship hard as well as regular teachers, and I think we need to watch out for it.
Thank you very much for that. Nav, is it worth it and why?
Yeah, I suppose, yeah, all of my journey's been worth it. I began my journey as a teaching assistant and it was worth it then, and it's worth it now as a trust leader. I think probably, as Helena said, the influence and the power of that you have when you become a head teacher means that you feel you maybe get a unique perspective in raising communities, lifting and growing others. But yeah, I would definitely say it is worth it, but just make sure that you've got your networks and mentors and people around you. I didn't have that in my early days as much as I could have and should have. I now have a wonderful leadership coach, Angie Brown. She's part of Nourish Collective, and it's just a great kind of space outside of school to kind of develop further. So yeah, absolutely worth it. And as Kezia said, just do keep asking those questions away, and I will keep having a look over the weekend, and between us, I'm sure we'll get there. Thank you everybody for today. It's been wonderful.
That's fantastic. Thank you. Helen.
Is it worth it? Absolutely, yes. I'm not sure I thought I'd be in the same school for 15 years, but done lots of things within that 15 years. And I think if you break me in half now, I'll probably have the school name on me. So that's going to be interesting. So I'm kind of going through to 5 years' time, I won't be a head anymore because I'm that old. So I'm going through that transition. But when I look back, it's going to be the most amazing memories and experiences. Things I would say, ask for help. You can ask for help quietly, or you can ask for help very loudly, because sometimes you need to, but ask for help. And, you know, there's a huge network of us that you can ask. Network is key, whether it's a professional network or personal. I think you need both, and, you know, use them well and, you know, develop your networks. My other thing, which is a personal to me, is I work really hard, but I play really hard as well. You know, and I do have that balance. You know, what my personal time is my own. Theatre, cinema, etc. Those things are really important to have a balance. And my final one is be compassionate. You know, I am very compassionate as a head, but you have to learn to be compassionate to yourself, and that sometimes gets left behind. So, you know, be kind to yourself as well, because if you go under, everything goes under, and your health is the most important thing in your life. So, you know, look after it.
Thank you, Helen. Alana.
Absolutely worth it. Definitely. Everything that you do as a part of the journey just feeds into that moment when you are in charge of the school, and it's unnerving, it's scary, it's got all the negatives that goes with it, but underlying that are the positives. So you have to be really sure of yourself, you have to be really sure of the values, you have to find the school that matches you, find the governing body that you know will understand your way of thinking, and ultimately you're there doing exactly what you came into teaching for, to serve the students around you and make sure that every child has the opportunity to get the best possible education that can be provided for them. And once you're doing that, everything's going to be wonderful. It'll all be worth it. So yeah, definitely go for the job.
That's awesome. Thank you. Binks.
Well, I mean, I've been head in 7 schools, so either I'm a really slow learner or I like it a lot. And I think actually one of the things I like the most is definitely what is enabling others. And when you get people that come to you, you don't realise you've done it, and the influence that you've had on people, and you've developed their confidence and enabled them to be really successful and them to become leaders as well. I think for me, that's been one of my the things that I feel, reflecting on it, the most proud of, that you've done something to enable other people to go on to leadership. And in this time, if you can't do a job that is giving hope, then what hope is there? So to me, it's just the most hopeful of jobs, and to keep that positivity front and central, because they are, it's a cliche, but they are our future, and we need the best people doing it. And I suspect some of the best people doing it are sitting in the audience, so to definitely have a go and keep connected.
That's fantastic. Thank you very much. My screen has completely just jumped around, so I have no idea where I was or what was happening, but I think it might be Caroline Barlow next.
Is it worth it? Absolutely, if it's the job that you want. If it is what really lights your fire and is true to who you are, then absolutely do it and love every second of it. And Kezzy, you asked why. I suppose I keep coming back to, there's my own daughter who's just turned 17, my son who's 14, my other 2 daughters who are now in their 20s. And I think of every young boy and girl who's in the school that I'm working in at the moment, and they need leaders to show them that the world can be different to how it is now. And whatever size, shape, or even gender those leaders come in, we need people with integrity and moral purpose. And if that's even an ounce of what you feel you have to contribute, then it's completely worth doing it, because seeing those young people become who and what they can be is just the best feeling in the world.
That's fantastic. Thank you, Caroline. Christella?
Everything everyone said, 1000% yes, it is worth it. I think there's a real sense of worth, of belonging, to know that you can create little people into bigger people that know how to bring about change. So the impact that you bring to communities you serve is not only a privilege, but it opens doors, not just for the children and the communities, it opens doors for your staff. So I feel that by doing that, you're growing a whole, and you're never on your own. Just remember that you don't do this alone. There is a huge network, especially here today. The Women Ed group are here to support you. So, we're here to guide and support and be that soundboard. So go for it. Go for it and get rid of all the concerns that you might have. Growing confidence.
That's awesome. Thank you very much, Christella. Ruth, and then it's Claire, and then it's Caroline.
I just echo the fact that it's such a privilege and joy. I think one of the greatest things about headship is enabling everyone within the community to flourish and thrive. And that's one of my key phrases. We have a little girl who's joined us from another local school with some special educational needs, and she was having some difficulty yesterday at the gate coming into school, and I was on the gate duty, and she said, I remember you've got the red shoes, and actually it's those little things, when she came in the gate and had a wonderful day and actually did have that success, makes it all worthwhile. And actually, those are the things which stick in your head at the end of the day. I made a difference, making a difference to individuals, but also communities collectively as well. And that stays with you. Plus, you've got enough funny stories to write your memoirs and retire upon.
Yeah, definitely. Binks is nodding quite furiously there. Thank you, Ruth. Claire.
Is it worth it? If it's a job you want, absolutely 100%. I've loved being a head teacher. I'd like to say every day, but obviously some days things get in the way. But it's a job of joy. It's a job of optimism. It's very futures looking. It's a job where you impact on a community as well as individuals. One thing I would say to everybody thinking about it is remember that we don't know all the answers. Coaching, being supported by other people, hooking into your Women Ed local network, making sure that you get support, and never ever thinking in the model of leadership that we think that we have to know all the answers. The day we know all the answers is probably the day we stop being an effective head teacher. Reach out, make sure that you lift others where you've been lifted as well. So make sure that we make this joyous community one that supports one another. And for some people, headship may not be the end result. You may not want to end up being a head teacher. There are other jobs that have equal impact. But if you want to be a head teacher, it's a great job to do. But just keep talking to other people when things don't feel that great.
Thank you, Claire. And Caroline Derbyshire.
Hi, so I went into teaching to make a difference, but I think I came to the conclusion that, yeah, you can make a difference to individuals, but you can't really make a difference to communities. And the thing about headship is that you can. And, you know, I've been a head now for 15 years. I've seen many students go through at both the schools that I have been head teacher and across the trust that I'm now CEO of. And, you know, there's nothing better than seeing what they become. So that's making a difference with children. You also make a difference to staff. And, you know, I've been so proud of the people and the colleagues that I've worked with who, you know, like Helena, have gone on to headship, who've gone on to senior leadership team and may well in the future go on to headship. And I think some of them might be watching now. And again, that's another legacy that you have. So you're making a difference in a big scale. And in a world which is, you know, wrong in so many ways, having a bit of control over that, being values driven, as other people have said, you know, is really heartening. I used to think that, you know, being a teacher was the best job in the world. I loved that, and I was wrong. It's the second best job in the world, because the best job in the world, I think, is being a head teacher.
Thank you ever so much for that. I'm delighted that we finished on such a positive note, and given, you know, the difficulties over the last 6 months, but particularly maybe over the last week or last 2 weeks, I'm really pleased that everyone's been able to join us this morning. Huge messages. Thank you ever so much for that. I'm going to be tapping up our panelists to see if they'll write a Women Ed blog, see if they fancy sort of summarising their journey to headship. Please do follow us on Women Ed, because today's been mostly about headship in the UK. There is also Women Ed England, which is a very recent fledgling group, but they're, you know, really dedicated to the English education system. So that would be fantastic if you can support with those. And Claire and Cristalla are from that team today. Thank you also to all of the panelists. You've been absolutely superb. Thank you for juggling, first of all, waking up this morning, small children, partners that may be trying to get in, dogs that are going bonkers, and all sorts of other things as well. Thank you for joining us today. What happens now is the computer does some magic again, where it converts it into a video file. I send it to my Women Ed colleague Jules, who tells me I've sent her the wrong file, and then I try and find the right file, and then I resend it to Jules. And at some point in the next week, it will be on YouTube. You will be able to see it, you will be able to share it with anybody else. And do go on to Twitter if you do have a question to ask us. Ask ahead, use the hashtag, use Women Ed, and I'm absolutely delighted that you've been able to join us for the first of our leadership series. Senior leadership and middle leadership will follow at some point, I'm sure. Have a wonderful weekend, and please keep well. Thank you ever so much, everybody.